you put people first. Focus on the person, not their characteristic. So, for example, instead of a blind man or a transgender woman, use a man who is blind or a woman who is transgender. We are more than our descriptors. So, putting people first maintains the individual. It makes us recognize that they are a person as the essential element. And then we only mention characteristics or their dimension of diversity when it's relevant to the discussion. Good day and welcome to this short nano learning on inclusive language. I am Dr. Florence Holland. It's my honor to stand before you for this brief time to really dive in as much as we can into inclusive language. Of course, inclusion really helps us foster an environment where individuals feel safe to engage. When people feel safe to engage, then they participate fully, because they feel respected, they feel free to express their ideas and values, and again, their unique voice, perspectives, and abilities can then help our organizations. So you may say, well, what's that have to do with inclusive language? Well, inclusive language is our way to name, honor, and value individuals' identities and experiences. So if we truly are a welcoming and inclusive organizations, that means we find conscious ways to name, honor, and value identities and experiences. So, increasing the inclusivity of our language means striving to understand that the ways that language often makes assumptions about people and unintentionally reinforces dominant norms of maybe around gender or sexual orientation, race, class, ability, disability, age, and so many more. So, again, the more we engage in inclusive language and we recognize the cultural diversity of individuals, the more comfortable as well we can get with courageous conversations. So, how do I do this? Well, I like to say there are 6 rules to inclusive language. Rule 1, you put people first. Focus on the person, not their characteristic. So, for example, instead of a blind man or a transgender woman, use a man who is blind or a woman who is transgender. We are more than our descriptors. So, putting people first maintains the individual. It makes us recognize that they are a person as the essential element. And then we only mention characteristics or their dimension of diversity when it's relevant to the discussion. Rule number 2, use universal phrases. OMG, for instance. What does that really mean? Or I live in the state of Alabama, and I say that when I moved here, there were so many phrases that people would use that I had no idea what they meant. But we don't only do that here, we do that all over this world. So jargons, acronyms, almost the alphabet soup kind of reference, it really does exclude people who may not have specific knowledge of a particular subject, and it really may impede effective communication. So sometimes they don't translate well from country to country. So know your audience. So for example, saying, that's a home run, or we hit that out of the park, that really implies that people have a reference to what? Baseball. And so we don't want that to fall flat on someone who may not have a baseball cultural impact or know its significance. So why not just say, we did a great job? So again, avoid using synonyms or acronyms and really use universal phrases. Number 3, recognize the impact of mental health language. We know coming out of this pandemic, even before the pandemic, let's say that, there used to be 1 in 4 people that the CDC would say had probably some mental health impact on their lives. We are saying coming out of the pandemic, at least 50%, meaning half of us will have some impact around mental health. And so we need to recognize the things that we say regarding them. Saying, I'm so OCD, or you're really acting, you're spazzing out, you're acting like someone has ADHD, right? These are real mental health diagnoses. And so instead of using them to kind of downplay or underplay, what we do from day to day, we really need to recognize that. So things like crazy or schizo or, paranoid, let's be very mindful that we are not using language to describe someone that may not have that or who may. And therefore, we just maybe possibly not have them feel included in our conversations or our groups. Number 4, use gender neutral language. I have a son that, growing up here in Alabama, he was born here in Alabama. And so I say growing up here compared to my other son. And he would walk through the store and he would, hey, y'all, hey. And I used to say, like, cringe, right? Oh my goodness, that is, country, don't say that. But actually, who knew that he's 15 now, going on 16. That so, 14 years ago, he was ahead of the game. That actually using words like y'all is actually more inclusive than hey guys, people. And our language, yes, while may have gendered connotations, we want to make sure that we understand that individuals may not identify with our traditional lines of gender. And so we want to make sure that we're inclusive. So use words like everyone, team, you all, as I suggest, children instead of boys and girls, siblings instead of, you know, brothers and sisters, instead of husbands and wives, partners, spouses. Let's make sure we're trying to be as inclusive as possible related to gender. Number 5, be thoughtful about the imagery you use. So, for example, as we're describing things, right? Black, dark, blind, they're also very symbolic sometimes of trying to express negative concepts. So, let's be sure that we use terms that may not be as offensive to some and should try to be, avoided. So, there are alternatives and ways that we can definitely draw imagery, use imagery that is not as negative in our concepts. And number 6, the last rule, the one that should top all of them, ask if you aren't sure. I know, I just said a bunch of examples. And sometimes people say, oh no, now I need a whole dictionary to know how to talk to someone. Or maybe that's why I'm not engaging in a courageous conversation because I don't know which word to use. I don't know what to call them. If you're not sure, just ask. Inclusive language is very nuanced. And yes, it may change over time. So if you're not sure, again, just ask. And some people go, oh, but Dr. Holland, you can't ask people questions. I like to say it's all about how you ask people questions. Again, how curious are you? To the point that you are honest, that you want to know and you want to make sure that you address them in the accurate way. So, taking time to find out how a person self identifies rather than making an assumption is actually a true line, a true kind of source of I'm trying to be the most inclusive person. Most people are happy to walk you through which language makes them feel properly acknowledged and respected. So, for example, don't assume someone's pronouns. Just ask them, what are your pronouns? So, these are the 6 rules of inclusive language. Put people first, use universal phrases, recognize the impact of mental health language, use gender neutral language, be thoughtful about the imagery you use, and lastly, ask if you're not sure. So, again, why would we want to do this? Because successful businesses rely on one thing: effective communication. We communicate with our employees, our customers, our suppliers, and stakeholders. Again, the list goes on and on. We communicate to sell, we communicate to build partnerships, to teach, to earn support, to hire, and again, the list goes on. So, as our society grows increasingly more diverse, and if trends continue, actually, culturally diverse groups will make up the majority of our society, as we say, by 2040. So, by learning to speak to a diverse audience, you can broaden your reach and transfer your message to more people. So, it is important to be conscious of who your audience is and understand how to make people feel included. Part of communicating more effectively with a diverse audience is beginning to understand your own bias, and yes, we all have them, and how your experiences and values shape the lens through which you view our world. We cannot assume that others share our viewpoint or see the world exactly the same way that we do. As I close this nano learning, I just really want to emphasize to you again that there are resources out there related to inclusive language, and there are tons of examples that others can use and possibly we can do today. So I want to more focus on what happens if you make a mistake. Again, the key is we're going to all make mistakes. So my way to navigate mistakes are a little twofold. So one, pick one thing you're working on. So for instance, I am working on you guys. Okay. I'm working on it. I have 3 sons, a husband, and a male dog. So when I say you guys, in that instance, I'm right on. However, when I'm speaking or presenting, that may not be the case. And so I am working on not saying you guys. So I picked one and I'm just about there. And so I am using y'all in more gender neutral language. I'm also, yes, trying to watch the jargons or the phrases I use. Again, as I told you, I live in the South. And so I think we use lots of phrases, like powwows and rule of thumbs and the peanut gallery. All of those actually have negative connotations if we look at the history of where those phrases come from, right? The rule of thumb was back in the day, the law that said how far or how in depth or, long as a bruise wasn't the size of an individual's thumb, it didn't need to be reported, meaning between a husband and wife in terms of abuse. Peanut gallery, that there were a place where obviously there was segregation and where African Americans could sit was in the gallery, the bottom part, but that meant the other individuals could throw peanuts down there. And so it became known as the peanut gallery. And obviously powwow has native, American connotations that actually is symbolic to them. And so for us, let's just say we're having a meeting. So again, what if we get it wrong? Again, pick one thing, but if you get others wrong, I just leave you with this. Remember this saying, intent versus impact. I know some people say, well, I didn't mean it like that. I don't know why they're so sensitive. Remember intent versus impact. You may not intend it. However, the impact of using or trying to use inclusive language could make someone's day and or not make someone's day. I'm gonna give you a short story and then we'll wrap up. My name, as I told you, is Florence. However, growing up in high school, my counselor called me Frances. Now, again, some people say, it's okay, it's close, but my name is Florence. I was a student government president, worked in the school office. I was a pretty good student. So in my high school, people knew me. So you would think she would get it right, but she didn't. I was always Frances. Fine. Fast forward to December of 2019. Actually, December 2020, excuse me. And I was a finalist for the Board of Trustees at Auburn University. Told you I live in Auburn, Alabama. And I worked at Auburn University and I have a degree from there. So I had applied, I became a finalist for the Board of Trustees. I had to have a virtual interview. And it was a panel made up of current Board of Trustees, the governor of Alabama, as she officially appoints the person, and some other individuals. The interview was going great. I had set myself up in an office space because, again, we were virtual. And really, I think, as I said, was doing an amazing job. The interview is almost over. The last question comes from the governor of Alabama. And she turns to the screen and she says, Frances, and she asks some question. To this day, I do not know what the question was. I don't know what my answer was. Because immediately it was like, if anyone's seen The Matrix, like my mind was just going, I was back to my 15, 16, 17-year-old self, where here is someone that needs to make a decision about me. and you can't even know my name. And I'm sure it was on a paper in front of her. Now, again, you may say, what does that matter? Well, for me at that moment, the impact was severe. I tell you, every time now I see her on the TV, I still look at her like that's the lady that calls me Francis. I'm sure she has no clue. I'm sure she did not intend for that to be the case. But the level of her impact in that moment was a reminder of, for some, what would be conceived as a microaggression or just the fact that someone can't get to know your name. So again, intent versus impact. If someone tells you that you messed up or they call you out on it, just say, I'm sorry for and apologize. And in the future, I will. Saying, I didn't mean it that way or, going up, it's not that. What you intended, I did not intend for that to happen, but I recognize the impact it may have. I'm sorry. And in the future, I will. Make the apology about you, not the energy, not on that person. Why do you feel that way? No, that you're sorry, and in the future, I will. If you do that and continue to follow the 6 rules of inclusive language, I promise you, you'll be well on your way to truly, truly, truly creating an environment that is inclusive for all and recognizing the dimensions of diversity so that people can and truly be their true, authentic self in your presence. Join me on the inclusion journey. Be the most inclusive person for someone today. And if you and I do that together, we'll continue to make this profession the most inclusive place it can be. Have a good day.